Okay. Technology is a wonderful thing, especially when it works. So here we are. Once again, welcome everybody to the Master Gardeners of Hamilton County's Saturday gardening class. We're happy to see you. And our presentation today is about orchids. And our speaker is Master Gardener Charles Davidson, who, as I said, is coming to us from his home in Mexico. Charles received a BS in plant sciences from Clemson University. He has worked in a commercial greenhouse just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. He also has a master in divinity from Columbia International University. And he's been a pastor and a missionary since 1986. And then he received a doctor of ministry at Covenant Theological Seminary. So since 1990, he's been a missionary with Mission to the World. So he's lived in Lima and now in Mexico. So he came to Chattanooga to be with his daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren during COVID, and that's when he joined when he started being a master gardener of Hamilton County. He'll always be a master gardener of Hamilton County.
All right.
And he's collecting his CEUs, but he will be certified soon. And he began collecting orchids in Peru in 1997. So, Charles, I am handing it off to you. And as I said in the chat earlier, just before we started, put your questions in the chat. If there's something urgent that you don't understand, I can, Charles will be happy to stop and answer the question. But for the most part, we'll take these at the end. All right. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you. Well, buenos dias to everyone. We're going to have a brief overview of orchids, how they grow, and then I want to talk specifically about a few types that I've grown and that you could probably grow too. But let's go back to the first slide. What makes orchids so interesting to me is that it's one of the largest order of plants, over 1,000, 10,000 really, different types around the world. They can be found growing from sea level all the way up to 10,000 feet, maybe a little bit higher, and even have an orchid that's found growing in Greenland near hot springs. So they're widely spread around the world. There's a wide range of plant sizes. Some species and genuses and species are so small you need a magnifying glass to really observe them. And then some are so large that they can be as tall as 6 to 8 feet. And then, of course, when you think about color size, flower sizes and colors, a tremendous variation of around the world. And then there's been all sorts of hybridization with orchids. They're one of the most easily hybridized plants in the world. Not only do hybrids exist in the genus between species, but also they're hybrids between genus, which is something not often commonly occurring with other plants. And so this has created a great deal of colors, forms, shapes, sizes. You could collect orchids for the rest of your life and never exhaust the possibilities. Here's some different orchids. Let me get my pointer highlighter. This is a native orchid of Belize in southern Mexico. It's called the black orchid. It looks purple. It is sort of purplish, but it also has, especially from the backside, a dark black look to it. Then, of course, the cataleas, very common, were used very commonly for corsages. This is an orchid from the Andes, Stanhopea. What I always thought was interesting, I've never had one of these, was how the flower has this corkscrew shaped lip to the flower. Here's another one from the Andes, Gongora. So it looks like almost like fish hooks coming down. This Miltoniopsis. Had one of these one time. Just a very pretty flower called the pansy orchid. Cymbidiums have been around for many, many, many years. Grown in Asia originally. Very pretty orchids. I couldn't identify this when I took this picture recently in the botanical gardens in Bogota, Colombia, but just very unique. I got this epidendrum here is one that I've grown and have, and then some are called oncidiums. We'll talk about these a little bit later, but just to show you some of the variations of flower sizes, colors, shapes that exist out in the wild. Think about sizes. This was growing in a tree. You can sort of, here's the part of the trunk, here's a trunk. So it's in the V of this tree. It's probably been there many years, orchid growing there at the botanical gardens. Huge. Here's a photo of a photo that I took at the same botanical gardens of a miniature orchid that is, you can see how small it is, the size of your thumbnail almost. And so from large to small, and then just unique colorations and forms of flowers. Think a little bit about the orchid anatomy. There are two basic anatomies of an orchid plants. Some are sympodial, then they grow along a rhizome. And at one end, the new growth will be occurring. And usually the good thing about sympodial orchids is that you'll often begin to develop more than one growing end. And then you have what they call pseudobulbs. The newer pseudobulbs, of course, are going to have the leaves, they're going to have flowers. And as they get age, after 2 or 3 years, the pseudobulbs will lose their leaves, but they'll remain alive. And they serve as an important source of food and water retention for the plant. So you don't want to just remove one. Eventually they will dry up and die on their own. And then the other type of growth is what's called monopodial. It's, as you can see, it's a straight growing stem, the flowers coming up, the roots down at the bottom. These don't normally produce new growth from below or anything. They just continue to grow straight up. Now here's some examples of the monopodial orchids. This is called the Vanda. This is a hybrid I was able to purchase. And it'll just keep growing right here. The new growth will continue to go up, roots will continue to go down. This is the ones that we all have seen probably and grown, the Phalaenopsis. Again, new growth will continue to come out above, and the roots will grow down from below, and eventually the older leaves will dry up, turn yellow and dry up, and you can pull them off. And then this is an example of an epidendrum. And the epidendrums, again, monopodial growth. And these are some examples of sympodial growth. This is an ontoglossum. And you can see there's new growth coming up out of this, from the base of this pseudobulb. If we could see the back side, the old pseudobulb is back here and will eventually die. This is a dendrobium. Again, sympodial growth, new growth is coming up in different places. And this isn't the best photo, but again, this is a oncidium and new growth coming here from one of the pseudobulbs. So how do orchids grow? I think that is a good point just to review. Most of our orchids that we're going to buy and have in our homes are either going to bloom in the spring or in the early summer. Following their flowering is when you typically will see new growth begin. The monopodials will put out new leaves at the top, and you will usually see new roots begin to emerge from the base of the plant. This is the sympodial orchids. Again, new growth will start at the edge of the rhizomes. And this is the best time to repot an orchid, just as the new growth is beginning, just as the new roots are beginning to form, because they're going to reach out quickly, the new roots, and go into your potting medium. Then later in the summer or in the fall, most of these orchids will have a period of rest. They're not going to be growing rapidly. The older pseudobulbs may lose their leaves at this time, but don't cut them off. They're still an important part of the plant. And then after this period of rest, you will begin to observe the plant producing flowering stems. I don't know how many of y'all have grown, have had Phalaenopsis, but my experience with them is that usually in December, even as early as November, I will observe new flowering stalks coming out from the plant. And then by February, March at the latest, they're in flower. So that's a basic growth cycle. The roots of orchids, there are three types. They're terrestrial, orchids that grow in the soil. And many of these orchids have a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungus. So it makes it difficult to transplant these from the wild. And of course, the two most common orchids in the United States in the Appalachians are the yellow lady slipper and the pink lady slipper. But understand they're very difficult to transplant. So it's probably better to leave them in the wild where they're growing. There are orchids that grow on rocks, lithophytes, or they grow on rocky surfaces. And of course, you can imagine these orchids are able to withstand periods of drought, of dryness, even if it's not during drought. Very unique. Let's think of a plant growing on a rock. And then the most common of the orchids, the ones that we grow the most and are most common for people, are the epiphytes, tree-growing orchids, the cataleas, Phalaenopsis, dendrobiums, altoglossiums, epidendrums, oncidiums. These are all going to be naturally found growing on tree trunks, on tree limbs. So that opens up a whole world of possibilities when it comes to how we can grow them. Here's some examples. This is the dendrobium. Lots of roots coming up out of the pot. These are healthy roots. Here's your Phalaenopsis, big heavy roots going down into the medium. And then this is an oncidium that I was able to find here in Mexico. It came to me potted in volcanic rock, of all things, just pure volcanic rock. Here's an example of a lithophyte growing on a rocky surface. We have to remember that the lithophytes and the epiphytes don't like wet feet because they're in medium or they're growing on surfaces that drain quickly. They may stay moist, and they need to stay moist, somewhat moist, but they don't like to be wet. So the epiphytes have aerial roots. So you're not going to be able to plant an epiphyte in a clay soil, a highly mineralized soil. They're not going to grow. They're not going to do well. The roots need access to air and to light. So what we're looking at is to try to find a potting mix that has the ability to retain some water, but at the same time, drain quickly. So usually the potting mixes that you can buy will be made up of fir bark, horticultural charcoal, perlite, sphagnum moss, rock wool, volcanic rock. These can be very ideal for the epiphytic orchids. And again, they need to hold some water, but you don't want it to be waterlogged. How about watering and fertilization? After the growing period ends and the orchid enters into a resting time, then they need to dry out partially between waterings. So as a general rule, you can water your orchid in the growing season while it's actively growing once and twice a week, and maybe in a resting period as little as once every 3 weeks. It'll have to depend on your growing circumstances, et cetera. But when it's not growing, you don't want to overwater it particularly. Then once it begins to show new growth in the spring, you want to begin watering it more frequently. You want to keep the plants evenly moist, but not wet. Sometimes when you see the pseudobulbs may be shriveled or even limp, you have to be careful here because it could indicate that they're being overwatered as well as underwatered. So you have to pay attention to your medium, what it looks like. Is it heavy with water? Is it light? Knock some of it out of the pot and look down in it. Again, do not leave your epiphytic orchids standing in water. Should be able to drain freely. And during the regular active growing cycle, they will all benefit from a regular fertilization with a soluble orchid fertilizer. And I would just say use those according to the recommendations on the package. It's recommended during the active growing time if you want to use a higher nitrogen fertilizer. And when you're getting ready for flowering, you want to switch over to one that has a higher phosphorus level. And then when it's time for the plant to rest, you really don't need to worry about fertilizing anymore. A little bit about the orchid flower itself. Orchids are monocots, and flower parts occur in threes. So here's showing your 3 sepals and then 3 petals. But what's unique about orchids is that you'll have 2 petals that we'll say are somewhat normal. And then one of the petals will be modified into what they call a lip. And there'll be a column with an anther cap. And underneath that will be the stigmatic surface. So you always have these 3. I have here's another photo. You have 3 sepals, two regular, what I'll call regular petals, and then 1 petal is going to be modified into a labium or a lip. And in the middle will be a column. And the column will have your anther cap as well as your stigma or stigmatic surface. Here's a flower that fell off one of my plants. And so on the front side, you can see it's hard to pick out all the parts, but here's 2 petals. And then in this case, instead of the 1 petal is super grande, very big. And then behind you can sort of pick out here the sepals. Again, on the back side, it's a little more clear, 3 sepals, and then 2 small petals. Here's the 2 small petals, and here's 1 large petal. And in the middle, you have the lip and the column and the lip. So just to give you an idea, when we think about orchids and pollination, another unique feature of orchids is that they don't have the usual anthers that other flowers have. The anther and the stigma are formed into a column. And the pollen itself exists in what they call polonia. It's in this case, 2 masses of pollen that are gathered together into like a ball, held together either with wax, a waxy substance. And so what makes these unique in the sense, this one, flowers of Vanda, is these look like little eyes looking at you. But you have to mechanically transfer the pollen to the stigma. This is nature, of course, this is done via insects or birds, bats. And so different orchids have different mechanisms for attracting the pollinators that they need. This can be done mechanically, humanly. Extract the polonia and stick it to the stigmatic surface. Thinking about light requirements for orchids. Most commonly, most all the orchids that we're going to grow in our home require bright light, but limited direct sunlight. There's some exceptions, and I'll mention those in a minute. Remember, a lot of these are epiphytes. They're found up in trees where they're going to receive fairly bright light, but it's going to be somewhat dappled with shade from leaves and limbs. So generally in our homes, orchid's going to do well in the eastern window that receives good morning light. but also in a southern window in the wintertime, especially in a southern or western window that maybe has some light shade to it. It can do very well in these situations. And then during the summer, it is very possible to put your orchids outside. Again, you would want an eastern exposure with some light shade in the morning, because most of them are not going to take direct sunlight all day long. However, some such as epidendrums and cymbidiums can be adapted to direct sunlight. I've had that happen here in Mexico. So bright light, but not direct sunlight all day long. It can have some direct sunlight. How about potting mixes? We talked a little bit about this, but we'll go back over it. It's easy to buy potting mixes for orchids in your big box stores. These are going to be a fir bark with some charcoal, maybe some perlite mixed in. You can also order specialty mixes. Looking online, just Google mixes for orchids, for orchid growing medium. And you can customize your mix. I usually do this. I'll mix a bag of some of this with some sphagnum moss. So typical materials that you're going to find again are fir bark, porous stones, perlite, sphagnum moss, natural charcoal. And I emphasize here, this is not, you don't want to use charcoal that you buy for your grill. This is just charcoal wood that's naturally been burned into charcoal, not been processed. Here in Mexico, I can find, well, things have come with coconut fiber, peat moss, irregular, just peat moss. And then you can also have fired clay pellets that are good. But again, you want any material that you use, you want it to allow water to pass through quickly, but you also want it to retain some moisture. But it needs to have airspace between the particles, between the mix, in the mix. Here's some photos. Here's your fir bark, some large pieces of perlite, some charcoal. Here's the sphagnum moss that you can buy. It comes dried in a bag. And then this was the volcanic rock that one of the orchids I purchased was planted in. Again, the sphagnum moss. I probably bought this at a Lowe's or Home Depot. Coconut fiber, the volcanic rock. Some orchids can take a little more typical potting mix, I'll call it. This is the epidendrum, an epidendrum that I had. And this was almost, not 100%, but say 80% peat moss with some perlite. And it did very well in that. Actually, I'll show you in a minute. We'll get back to these, but it can almost be terrestrial orchids. What are you going to put your orchid in? Well, clay pots, ceramic pots, plastic pots can all be used to contain orchids. The one I like to use the most are a clay pot that has extra holes in it for drainage. You can order pots online. You can find pots, of course, at your stores. One of the great advantages to me of having a clay pot over a plastic pot is that they're heavier. And some of these orchids, not super tall, but they become top heavy. And so it's nice to have a heavier pot that's not going to tip over easily. Then some orchids like the Vandas, they will do well without a pot at all, just in a slatted basket. And the roots just hang down into the air. There's no potting medium around them at all. Another potting medium that you can find online, you're not going to find this in the store, is a tree fern. And tree ferns grow in tropical areas, New Zealand, and basically tropical areas. And they've been cut down. They're almost tree-like. And you can either get a cross section of the tree fern, or you can get a bowl-shaped tree fern. And then, of course, you can also mount orchids if you want to try something like this. This is something I've had in the past. It's something I'd like to do again in the future. You can mount orchids onto a piece of bark or onto a limb. You'll have to fasten them well to the piece of bark or limb or tree tree fern. You have to fasten them well enough so that they don't flop around. So if they flop around, the roots are not going to grow and they're not going to attach. But once you get them attached, then of course you can untie or remove your mechanical restraint. So here's some examples. Your flower pot or a orchid pot, clay. Here's some miniature Phalaenopsis mounted on a branch. Very pretty, isn't it? And here's an example of what I'm talking about with tree fern. These are been carved out in the bowl shape. A good advantage of these is that the roots are going to penetrate into these. And well, it's just unique. They're going to drain easily, obviously. Same thing with mounting it. You're going to actually water a plant like this more than you would if it was in a pot, because it's going to dry out quicker. The disadvantage of mounting an orchid on a tree or bark or using a tree fern is that once it's attached, it's very difficult to remove. It's not something that you can just up and decide, oh, I don't like that anymore. You can remove them, I'm sure. It's going to set the plant back. Temperatures for orchids. Many of our most common orchids that you're going to grow like temperatures anywhere from 55 to about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are somewhat similar to the temperatures that we're going to find in the summer in Northeast Tennessee. Sure, Chattanooga is a little bit hotter than that during the day normally, but and it's not that cool at night. But if we went up farther in Northeast Tennessee, this would be the type of temperatures we'd find in the Great Smoky Mountains, for instance. When we lived in Lima, Peru, we had a climate that was really ideal for orchids. Wintertime temperatures oscillated between about 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And our summer lows would be down in the 60s and up to around maybe as high as 85. And so I was able to grow orchids there outdoors year round. Here in Monterrey, Mexico, our summer temperatures can reach into the low 100s. And at the same time, I've been able to keep plants outside in a shady area during the summer. And then our winter temperatures here can actually drop below freezing occasionally. So usually by December through February, I have to bring the orchids indoors. It's too cold at night. But there are a lot of variations, just as in Chattanooga with temperatures, even in the winter. Here's just a basic guide that you can use. There are 3 basic types of orchids: cool growing, intermediate, and warm growing. So your cymbidiums, your oncidiums, and odontoglossums like cooler temperatures. So in the summer, they're not really going to do too well outside, although what I've read was if they're kept in a area and well watered, they'll do all right. There's intermediate growing, the cattleyas, that again like it a little bit warmer. And then you have a few like the Phalaenopsis and the Vandas that really do like warm temperatures, especially the Vandas. So just to give you an overview of different temperature ranges. Again, orchids are I've found them to be very, very adaptable to growing in different circumstances, even when they're not ideal, that they will adapt and continue to grow and flower. How do we reproduce orchids? Well, it is possible to produce seed. If you have an orchid, you can mechanically move the paulownia to the, now I can't think of the word, to the female part and get seeds to produce seeds. But orchid seeds are very, very small. And they lack a gymnosperm that other seeds have in order to really germinate and grow on their own. So what commercial growers do is they're specialized mediums that are sterilized in flask that they will put the seed and get them to germinate and begin to grow. In the wild, the orchid seeds need to encounter a mycorrhizal fungi that is compatible with them, that the fungi then produces the sugars and the nutrients that they need in order to grow the new seedlings. But it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years, even in the commercial setting, from seed to a flowering plant. So it's usually not for the home grower. We're not going to be trying to grow orchids from seeds. This is for the commercial grower. This is people that are hybridizing and want to get new colors, new shapes, new forms. So how are we going to reproduce orchids? Well, asexual reproduction is the best method, the quickest way. With your monopodial orchids, it's going to be more difficult because they don't normally produce a new plant. But there's some exceptions, and we'll look at that. The sympodial orchids are easier to reproduce because once the plant becomes fairly large, it's easy to divide it. Basically cut the rhizome in half. Especially if you have 2 growing tips, then each new plant can be repotted, and you have 2 plants. But some monopodial orchids will produce keikis. This is a Hawaiian word for baby. And these keikis are easily removed and planted. So epidendrums, phalaenopsis, and dendrobiums are known to produce keikis. And here's a picture of a phalaenopsis that has produced a keiki. It's got the roots. Actually, at this point, this came off the flowering stem. So it could be cut, the flowering stem could be cut down here below, and you just put that in a new pot, a small pot with your potting medium, and it should take off and grow just fine. Another one that is easily reproduced in my experience has been epidendrums. This was, again, a photo taken at the Botanical Gardens in Bogota. This plant was growing out in full sunlight. Here was the end of a growing stem, and it's got at least 2 small plantlets coming out. Again, it would just be a matter of cutting down below, sticking it down into the potting medium, and leaving it. It should send out its roots and keep growing. Here's the epidendrum growing in Bogota and in front of a apartment building. And we were there, and I snuck a little piece of plant back with me to Mexico. So here I went down at the base. This one didn't have the keikis up front, but it had new growth coming down here at the base. So I got this one that had some roots already, and then this one broke off, and I'm going to see if it won't root for me, send out its roots. Here's again the new growth. Eventually, this plant would need to be divided. The older pseudobulbs, the oldest ones, probably cut off, and then the new ones repotted. And when you repot a symbodial, you want to make sure that the growing edge is farthest from the if you're putting it in a pot, is farthest from the edge of the pot. Again, here's a symbodial orchid. I was also wanted to show you this one because this is when I got the plant. And this is a Ondoglossum, and it's not done very well. When I brought it home, it's been really hot here until just today. Today's cooled down, but we've been in the 90s. It's a bit dry, not real humid. It was had to leave it outside for a while. It was on a trip so somebody could water it regularly, got too wet. And so you can see sort of a color difference here. This washed out a little bit. It's probably where it got too much sun on that leaf. There's a little bit more yellow. But what encourages me to believe that this plant's going to survive is that we do have new growth still coming out here and here. So I'm going to eventually repot this, get it in a drier medium, and see if it won't do better. Now we're coming in, of course, late mid-October, we're starting to cool down more. So that's a good sign. So now I'd just like to share briefly about several different types of orchids that you can grow in your home. The Cattleya has been around for a long, long time. There are many habitats. There are many hybrids. There are interspecies hybrids with Cattleyas as well as intergeneric. It is, I guess, still continues to be in some ways one of the most popular orchids, but mostly for corsages. And really for home growers, it's been eclipsed by the Phalaenopsis. Cattleyas do well with bright light and some direct sunlight in the mornings. You can grow these easily mounted on a piece of bark or tree fern, but also in a pot with a fir bark orchid mix for growing medium. And mature Cattleyas need to dry out completely between watering, while younger plants need to be maintained at more consistent moisture level. So pretty flowers, lots of range of colors. Had one that I collected in Mexico or in Peru, this one called the Cattleya maxima. It's a natural flower. It's a naturally growing orchid in Peru. The cymbidiums, I don't know if anyone has ever had a cymbidium. I had my first cymbidium here in Mexico. They originally came from Asia, China, Japan. They're basically warm season plants, cool season plants. There are many hybrids. They've been cultivated for hundreds of years in Asia. They're not necessarily a good house plant because they need bright light and because of their size. You can get an idea of how big this cymbidium has grown to be. They like to be grown in a rich medium. And when I say rich, heavy on the peat moss. They like to be something that will retain that moisture. They'll bloom in the spring. And I found that the one I had here was adapted to growing outside, except in the coldest weather, in full sun in the morning, from 8 to 1, 2 p.m. And in heat, because we're looking at temperatures in the upper 90s to low hundreds at times. And it did fairly well. It grew and grew and grew. It got killed, unfortunately, by frost last winter here. Epidendrums are another one that I've been able to grow and I've enjoyed. They're native to the Americas. There's native plants here in Mexico and Peru and in all of South America. There are not many hybrids, and really they may be hard to find. These are not going to be a common orchid you're going to pick up at Lowe's or Home Depot. You have to order one. This is the Epidendrum radicans, which is native to Mexico and Central America. It's one that we saw growing in Bogota, Colombia. Then there's, well, no, I'm getting mixed up. This is the radicans that's native to Mexico and Central America. This one is the segundum, which grows widely also. Seen it here, I've seen it in Bogota. Again, I found that these grow real well, much better in a peat mix with some orchid potting mix mixed in to give it a little bit more aeration. And they can grow fairly tall, 3 to 4 feet or taller. They like bright light, and I found that they could tolerate full sunlight in the mornings. They have these small blossoms. And each blossom does not necessarily last a long time, but they continue to bloom for a long time, for several weeks. And they have these reed-like stems that will produce those keikis, and so you can multiply them quite easily. And this one also have found growing in regular soil. Well, I would say regular soil, but soil with a high organic matter in it. Here's some of the Epidendrum radicans from Peru. And here's the segundum. And again, growing in this garden in front of an apartment building in full sun, or at least part of the day. The oncidiums are also orchids from the Americas. They're a large genus. They've wide range of habitats. They can be found from low jungle areas to high elevations. Generally, they like cooler temperatures, 50s at nights, mid 80s during the day. They like bright light, but not necessarily direct sunlight. And I have an oncidium here that I left outside. for it to be watered for the last 3 weeks, and it got a good, strong morning sunlight, but didn't suffer any damage from that. It's done real well. The ontoglossums are high, generally higher in the Andes Mountains, so they like cooler temperatures, and they don't tolerate heat as well. I'm finding that out with the one that I have. They like to be grown in a pot that's going to restrict their root growth and use a fine bark mix. But in the summer, you can, if you have a shady area, not dark shade, but shade, where they can be kept moist and humid, they should be able to survive and grow. They need bright light, and they need less water in the winter months. The one that we're most familiar with are the Phalaenopsis hybrids. These are, I guess, would say the most widely grown and produced and distributed orchid in the world today. They have been adapted to grow well in the indoors. A good healthy plant should bloom every year. They do well in a coarse mix of fir bark, but they can also tolerate some peat moss. 3 or 4 years ago, I had a chance to go up to visit Lyons Orchids up on Signal Mountain and noticed that they were growing their Phalaenopsis in pure peat moss. So again, very adaptable. You need to allow the potting mix with your Phalaenopsis to dry out almost completely between waterings and then re-water it. You need to, they do well being fed with an orchid fertilizer on a regular basis, especially when growth is active. But they could also be mounted on a tree, on bark, or on a section of tree or tree fern. So Phalaenopsis, and just a range of colors of flowers. And of course, now they have the miniature Phalaenopsis that you can get at stores. And then the Vandas. I'm growing my first Vanda. And these are from Southeast Asia originally. They are warm tropical growing orchids. There are lots of hybrids. Plants don't need a medium to grow in. The one I bought came just the roots hanging freely into the air. You can have them in a slatted basket to give some way to hang them. And the plants tend to be very large. The roots are going to hang down 2 to 3 feet below the plant. The growth above can be a foot, 2 feet long. They typically are going to need high humidity and frequent waterings since the roots aren't surrounded by a medium. And they're, unfortunately for the home grower, they're going to be difficult to grow. That's because it's going to be difficult to have the conditions in your home, especially in the winter months, that they're going to need. In the summer, of course, they could be outside where they get morning sun, where you could water them freely with a watering hose. But in the winter, that's going to be a little more difficult. So I think that is interesting. The one that I had, we first bought at home. The instructions said water once or twice a week. So I began to notice that the leaves were beginning to shrivel some and wrinkle. So I thought, well, I think this plant needs more. It's not really that humid at that time of the year here in August and September. So we started taking the hose to it, had it hanging outside the hose to it 3 or 4 times a day, and just making sure that the roots got wet. It dried quickly, of course, but I'm excited to come back from my trip and see that their new roots are growing now, putting out some new root shoots, which is very encouraging. And we'll see how it survives the winter here. Here's an example of what I mean by the Vandas roots. You see the roots hanging down here. There's a little plastic basket that they initially put this plant in, probably when it was very small. And of course, all this new growth coming up here, the blossoms, again, the color ranges, but these are the roots. They'll be whitish when they're wet, when they're dry, and they become greenish when they're wet. Just wanted to share a brief video, if I can start it here. There we go. On repotting an orchid. We are going to repot this orchid. I purchased this here in Mexico. It came from the grower in this volcanic rock right here, only the rock. The other day I went out to water in the evening and the wind was blowing and it knocked this pot over. And so it's sort of riding up high now, and I thought it would do better to repot it in a new mix. I'm going to be using two different things. I'm going to be using this orchid mix, and I'm also going to be using this sphagnum moss. It's dry, so I'm going to put it in some water, let it start soaking here. And then at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and reuse some of this volcanic rock that it's already come in, give it some weight. And I'll be using this orchid pot. I call these orchid pots because they have these holes on the sides that allow extra drainage. Remember, these epiphytic orchids don't like to have wet feet. So we'll get started. This moss is getting softer now. Once it's soft, it's pliable. I'm going to use this bowl to mix my potting mix in. Again, I'm going to be using this potting mix that you can buy at any store. It's mainly bark. It has some charcoal in it, some bark, and also a little bit of perlite, large granules of perlite mixed in there. So I'll mix this with the moss and some of the rock, and then I'll begin putting it into the container, the new pot. Start loading handfuls of my bark mix with some charcoal. At this point, the moss is pretty damp. It's not going to fall apart on me. So I'm going to take it out of here, put it over here. And just begin to mix this together. Begin to get some of this rock out. This can all go in here. I'll need a little bit more. This for the size of the pot. You can always save whatever you have left over for the next time you need to pot an orchid. So we're going to just tip this over. All the rock is in there. Pour this in here. It has some other little pellets here. I don't know if these were fertilizer. I don't think they would have put fertilizer in the plant like that, but who knows? You can see how the roots have grown down into around the rock. In some cases, they've grown into the rock because this is porous. Here's the dead end where the old growth is taking place at this end. At this end, we have the new growth coming out. And of course, here's the main flowering stem. So let's just lay this down for a minute. And let's put some in the bottom of the pot first, like you would any plant. My goal is to try to have the soil line coming up to about right here, to give stability to this plant, to the orchid. So, coming in here with this. All right, I'm still going to need a little more of the bark mix. We'll put some more of this bark mix because I didn't have quite enough out. Then to give a little more weight to this, I'm going to put some of the rocks, volcanic rocks that this came in to begin with, back on top. And that will help weigh things down. This will be sitting outside in the shaded area, which gets fairly bright light, but not direct sunlight. So that's basic way to repot orchids. And Lord willing, this is going to survive and thrive for me. As you can see, this is still a bit floppy. And so I want it to have a good solid start. So the best thing to do is to, you can use a little twisty like from a garbage bag. You can buy clamps or a little type of clamps for your orchids. A little twisty like this will work just fine. And all I want to do is just lightly weave that around and twist it to this post. That will help maintain the stability of the plant. And eventually the roots will begin, as they continue to grow out, they will anchor this plant very well into this mix, into the pot. So after we repotted it, we're going to go ahead and water it. I'll change the locations, obviously, to come outside. This hose has been in the sunlight, so I'm going to let the hot water flow out first before I try to water the plant. Okay. We're just going to let the water run through there several times. That should be sufficient. So it's pretty bright outside right now. It's 11 o'clock here, and it's too bright to leave this orchid in the direct sunlight. We burn the leaves. So I'm going to put it here. We have the stand, and it allows good light without being in direct sunlight. Okay. So just to finish up here, this was the plant that I repotted about 6 weeks ago. That the new growth was there, but before that, but you can see it's continued to grow. Something I was real excited to see was these evidence of new roots, the growing tip. See one coming down here. So I didn't, of course, pull it out of the medium to see if the roots were growing in the medium, but I'm going to assume that their new growth is taking place. And then also this Oncidium is putting out a new flower stalk. So I was surprised and glad to see that as well. Where can you find information on growing orchids? In doing some research, and for this presentation, I went to the American Orchid Society's website. A tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of places to find companies or commercial growers that are selling orchids. They have some good fact sheets, basic fact sheets for growing all sorts of orchids. And over the time, I've been able to collect some books. One of ones that I used particularly was Growing Orchids, a complete guide to orchids in their cultivation by Brian and Wilma Rittershaw. It's available on Amazon. It's very complete, has a lot of information, lots of very pretty photos. Then there's another book by them, Orchid Basics, Hints, Tips, and Techniques for growing orchids with confidence. And then a much smaller book, or a paperback book that I have is called Orchid Growing Basics. And all of these, of course, are available on Amazon. So spend a lot of time talking. Just see if there's any questions.
Wow. Thank you, Charles. That was great. We do have a couple of questions. Patrice Sweet, you had a question. Do you want to unmute and ask your question? You're welcome to do that. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you. So I have a couple of orchids that I think are Phalaenopsis orchids that were gifted to me. And one of them, the stem that had the flowers on it, has turned brown and kind of dry, and the other one is still kind of green. What do I do with those? Do I clip them off, or will they naturally fall off?
Trim them off, take the sharp hair scissors or your clippers, and down near the base of the leaf where it came out, maybe about an inch above that leaf, just cut it off. And you could, even when it's green, you can cut it off if it's finished flowering.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy Lusk, you had a question about something, an orchid on your property.
Yes, we have these native orange fringed orchids. And we just noticed them this summer because we moved in last spring into our new home. And there were about 5 of them. They're not even close together. I put flags where they were, but what should I do to try to continue to get these back? They're real pretty.
I've never grown those or seen those, but I would suppose just there must be a native orchid growing in East Tennessee.
Yes.
I suppose not really that much. You need to do much of anything. They'll come up again in the spring, bloom, and then at some point the foliage dries back or dies back to the ground level. Probably what you did was the best idea is just to mark where they're growing so you don't dig them up accidentally.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Interesting.
You had another question about monkey-faced orchids?
Oh yeah, I came across Martha Stewart was showing orchids once, and she had the monkey-faced orchid, and it looked similar to one that you had shown. I think it's the, well, I don't know. Do you know what that monkey-faced orchid is?
I don't know. Try to stay with genus and species and not common names. None of the ones that I presented are necessarily known as monkey orchids in the literature.
It might.
You said it might be an epidendrum.
An epidendrum, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, it could be. Well, just is what I know about epidendrums, what I've grown anyway, is that they do well with sort of I'll call it a heavy mix of heavy on peat moss. Some of them can grow into a rich soil with lots of organic matter in it. So but of course in your area you can't grow them year round outside. So you'd have to pull them in during the winter. So you probably wouldn't want to plant them in the garden. But just a rich soil, heavy on peat moss. In my experience, they do real well.
Thank you.
Karen Webster had a question about cutting off the stem. Karen, do you want to ask your question specifically? If you're here.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
I have a Phalaenopsis orchid, and it had 2 stems, 2 bloom stems, and they
Yes.
finished blooming. And do I cut that back, that 1 inch above a leaf, or if I leave it, will I get another bloom off of it?
The literature will say if right as they end blooming, if you can trim them up high, and sometimes they'll send out a new blooming or stem off of the old. But I've never had that happen particularly. My suggestion is just trim them back close to where they came out from the leaf, and wait till next year for a new bloom.
Thank you.
Also,
I have okay, let's see, it's the jewel box Catalia, and it has not bloomed since 2017. And it looks
Oh,
healthy.
okay.
It looks healthy. I now have it under grow lights. I have for the last probably 8 months.
Okay.
And it's happy. It's just not blooming. And I'm fertilizing it with a orchid fertilizer. Any ideas to make it decide to quit sending out foliage and bloom?
Most of the things I read about when orchids aren't blooming is generally has not received enough light. And cattleyas do like bright light. So probably what you're doing with the grow lights is good. You may see something this spring with the blossoming, since it's had more light these past 8 months.
Okay.
If it doesn't, you could try putting it outside this coming summer, and again, good bright light without maybe even some direct sunlight in the mornings. It should do fine, but probably just a lack of light.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
You might also want to try, if your orchid fertilizer is high in nitrogen, switching over then to one that's higher in phosphorus.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Actually, Charles, could you talk a little bit about fertilizing? When is it necessary, and is a commercially available orchid fertilizer advisable, or is there a timing? Obviously not when they're dormant.
No, but yes, I've just used commercial water soluble orchid fertilizer. I probably, in my experience, has fertilized less than what the recommendations might be. But there are two basic ways. You can either, when they're actively growing, fertilize, say, every other watering. You could dilute the fertilizer even more than what's recommended on the package and fertilize with every watering if you want to. But yeah, just when they're actively growing is when you want to be applying a fertilizer. And again, when they're new growth, you probably want to be a little bit heavier on the nitrogen. And then when you're reaching the growth is maturing, you want to switch over to a more high phosphorus fertilizer. But I would just use what's commercially available. You can use 20-20-20, water soluble 20-20-20, but I hardly have ever used it full strength. What's recommended. I just don't want to take the chance of burning the plants. So that's just sort of my feeling about about fertilizing. You can over fertilize, so you're probably better off under fertilizing. But yeah, they all will benefit from some fertilization. And that Oncidium that I repotted in the thing, those apparently were fertilizer pellets, extended release pellets. I've never used anything like that with my orchids, but that's how it came from the grower. Because they were probably watering it every day. This probably was grown in southern Mexico.
Aha. Okay, we have one more question. Mary, you have something about an orchid that has blooms but no leaves.
Yes, I have a Phalaenopsis orchid and it has blooms but not really leaves. How does that happen?
Good question. You only have like one or two leaves or what?
I think there's one on there
Well,
right now. It's just not generating leaves, but it is blooming.
Well, they don't normally put out new growth until after it finishes blooming. So it sounds though in one way that the orchid's not all that healthy if it's not got 3 or 4, 5 leaves on it. I'm even surprised it's able to bloom, but you just have to wait. Have you ever repotted it?
Yes, recently, about
recently?
6 months ago.
Okay. What did the roots look like at that time? Do you remember? Were they
They
flat? Were
they
growth?
look pretty healthy.
Okay.
Should I just
Well, I
wait a
guess-
cycle? I was probably just gonna wait and see what happened,
Yeah,
in the
I
next.
think that would be the best thing. Just wait, see what happens after it finishes blooming. You should see new growth coming on it. Usually
hope so.
mine have always produced 2 or 3 new leaves every year.
Okay. We will hope for the best.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes we just don't, just like with any other plant, things just don't go right. And we lose them.
Thanks.
Let's see, Diana has a question about mission orchids growing. Diana, do you want to ask your question?
Mhm.
I don't know if you're,
These flowers grow outside. I was given them back in 2012, and it's like a tall bush. And the orchids grow. They come in individual flowers, but there's multiple flowers on it. They're
Okay.
white and they have purple centers. But I've not done
Hmm.
anything with them. I just put them in pots, put them outside.
Well, I guess I'm not familiar with that name, but yeah, it sounds like
got
what you're doing is working. So
Well,
just
I
keep
got them
doing it.
as an Easter dinner present, and
Okay.
it was just a clump of them, and then I didn't know what to do with them because it was too big for us to keep inside, so we planted
Okay.
it outside, and I passed them to everybody, and they're
You
blooming
said that they grew like a bush,
well. It's tall; they grow bunched up,
tall,
and
sort of a
it's
reed
tall,
looking stem.
yeah, like a weed type,
A
or
reed,
almost like, oh gosh, I don't know, but we love them.
Okay. Oncidium, well, not oncidiums, cymbidiums grow with strap-like leaves, and they come out of a pseudobulb at the bottom, and there'll be lots of leaves, but that doesn't sound like what you're describing. Epidendrums will have a cane-like stem.
No.
Well, I don't know. I'll search around and see if I can see anything under that name. But
I
it
just
sounds
Googled
whatever
it
you're
and it
doing
didn't
is
come
working,
up.
so just keep doing it.
Yeah.
What's that, Suzanne?
I just Googled it and it didn't come up as a plant. It came up as a name. So I wonder if
Okay,
it's an orchid from a certain, I don't know, but it sounds like it could be.
They're white flowers with deep, deep purple centers.
okay.
Send Charles a picture.
Yeah.
All right, one more. Can you speak about diseases or insects or other remedies? Other things that might happen to an orchid that we might have to deal with?
Yes, I didn't really cover that. There are any number of insects that orchids can be afflicted with, aphids, mealybugs. Occasionally, it seems like maybe I've had some mealybugs in the past. Generally, you want to, with those type of insects, you want to take a cotton swab, maybe with some alcohol on it, and remove the individual insects. Spider mites can afflict orchids and do a lot of damage. So again, you probably would have to look for a special insecticide or miticide to use to kill those if it's a heavy infection. Changing the environment, spider mites sort of like it dry, so more humidity. Washing the plant more frequently, for instance, under a stream of water is a good way to remove spider mites. So those are some of the things. Some of the other, there are other insects and things that can attack, but those are the most common. And then some things to watch for with orchids, if you've had them indoors in the winter, even in good light, when you first put them outside in the spring, if you want to put them outside for the summer, you have to adapt them. acclimate them. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Acclimate them to actually brighter sunlight than they would be getting, of course, in a window or even with grow lights. So if you put them directly out too quickly, you're going to get burnt leaves, which may or may not kill the plant, but it's going to be unsightly. I've did that here with some Phalaenopsis that I had, stuck them out and too quickly in the sun, had some spots or areas on the leaves that got burnt and basically just dried up that area. So those sort of things. Again, overwatering is if the roots, if they're overwatered, almost all of these, if they're overwatered or stay waterlogged, the roots are going to turn black. They're going to die because they need oxygen. They need air. So, and the roots actually, many of these, the roots are actually part of the photosynthesis, taking some of the burden of photosynthesis. You might have noticed that if you buy a Phalaenopsis at one of the stores and it's in a clear plastic container where you can see the roots, they'll be very green. And so are the roots healthy? If the roots are growing, that's always a good sign. New root growth is always a good sign. So you want to avoid overwatering, observe the roots. Most all of these are going to benefit from being repotted, say every 2 or 3 years in new medium. So I don't know if that helps a bit, Suzanne, sorry.
Patricia asked about this. She also asked about scale. Do orchids get scale?
Yes, scales, another insect disease that they can develop. Again, if it's a light infection, just physically remove it. Use your fingernail and lightly scrape them off. A little bit
So
of
it's like any
alcohol.
plant.
Yeah, just like any plant.
Right. And I have one more question. This is for B, do you, if your environment might be on the dry side or can be, do you mist orchids ever? Do you, even if they're indoors, that can create problems as well. So I don't.
That is, most of the literature you'll read, that is recommended. Misting, say 2 or 3 times a day. I had some Phalaenopsis. We lived in El Paso, Texas. I don't know if anybody's been to the American Southwest, but I'm sure many of you have, but it's very dry there. I mean, in the winter months, the indoor humidity's maybe 20%. Even in the summer, I mean, you're looking at a regular 15 to 20% relative humidity. And I didn't do anything special. I had them in a nice window with good morning light. I just made sure that they stayed watered regularly. But I didn't make any special efforts to raise the humidity around them, and they seem to do just fine. So, but most things you're going to read are going to recommend that you either mist or use a shallow tray, put pebbles, and so that there's some water sitting underneath the plant. They're not sitting in water, but they're up above the water, and you get a greater relative humidity around the plant. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have come to the end. Are there any other questions? If you haven't written your question in and you still have a question, feel free to unmute and ask your question. I think then we're done. If everybody would like to unmute, this has been wonderful, Charles, and give Charles a round of applause, since so many of us are deciding not to reveal our true selves on this. I completely understand. So thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
That was really great. And the this video will be on the Master Gardener of Hamilton County Facebook page. I can quickly put that in the chat in case you don't know where it is. And it will be there for you to go back to and refer to. It'll be there for a while to come. That's our Facebook page.
Yeah, thank you.
And our other videos from our Saturday classes for this, for all of 2021 are there. You just need to kind of go go down the timeline, and you'll get, when you get to January, you'll see all of them that are there. So you can enjoy all of our classes. And we have one more class for 2021 in November. It will be the third Saturday in November, which is the 20th. And we will have some version of our annual making holiday decorations with live materials, with greenery and other things, that natural and ribbons and things. So we will we'll definitely we'll have something on November 20th, and go to our website to find out more about our activities. If you're here, you probably went to our website at some point, but it's just where is it? Here we go. I'll put that in the chat too. This is our website. There you go. The videos are not on YouTube at the moment. Master Gardeners have a YouTube channel, but we need somebody to help us edit them before they can be put up there. I think if I can transfer what's on Facebook to YouTube, we'll make an effort to do that. But this is our YouTube channel is a work in progress at the moment. So anyway, thank you everybody for being here. And now some of us are going off to the Master Gardener Awards and graduation celebration at the Ag Center, and I need to get there. So anyway, Charles, thank you so much. It was great that you had an excuse to come to Chattanooga, and we hope you'll come back.
I will.
And if you decide to grow something else, let us know, and we'll invite you back for a Saturday class. But
All right.
more on orchids. I mean, there's a lot to learn. So anyway,
Yeah.
thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
All
Be
right.
well. Take care,
Bye.
Charles. We'll see ya, and thank you
Bye.
once again.
Graduate.